time I go for the mailbox, gotta hold myself down. Oh yeah, now. And I just can't wait for the day till you come back around. I'm walking on sunshine. Oh, I'm walking on sunshine. Oh, I'm walking on sunshine. Oh, and it's time to feel good. Hey, it's all right now. So it's time to feel good. Hey, it's all right now. I used to think maybe you love me. Now, baby, I'm sure. I just can't wait for the day till you knock on my door. Now every time I go for the mailbox, gotta hold myself down. Oh yeah, I just can't wait for the day till you come back around. Oh, I'm walking on sunshine. Oh, I'm walking on sunshine. Oh, I'm walking on sunshine. Oh, and it's time to feel good. Hey, it's all right now. I said it's time to feel good. Hey, it's all right now. I feel alive. I feel alive. I feel alive. Oh really, I feel alive. I feel alive. I feel alive. Oh really, I feel alive. I feel alive. Oh feel alive. Oh really. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm walking on sunshine. Oh, I'm walking on sunshine. Oh, I'm walking on sunshine. Oh, so it's time to feel good. Hey, all right. So it's time to feel good. Hey, oh yeah. So it's time to feel good. I'm walking on sunshine. Oh, I'm walking on sunshine. Oh, walking on sunshine. Oh, so it's time to feel good. Hey, all right now. So it's time to feel good. Hey, oh yeah now. So it's time to feel good. Hey, all right now. So it's time to feel good.
Beautiful day, oh sun was shining. I had the radio on. I was driving, and the trees went by. Me and Dale was singing a little runaway. I was crying. Well, I'm running down a dream that never would come to me. Been working on a mystery, going wherever it leads. Yeah, I'm running down a dream. Well, it felt so good, like anything was possible. I hit cruise control, rubbed my eyes. 3 days, the rain was unstoppable. I was cold outside, no sunshine. Yeah, I'm running down a dream. Never would come to me. Working on a mystery.
Thank you, Danny. All right, everybody satisfied after lunch now? Everybody wide awake after lunch now? It's been fun so far. We got 2 sessions to go. And we thanked some of the sites, and we've got them all over the world here, and the 50,000 people who are taking part. Papua New Guinea in the house, New Zealand, Work Matters in Rogers, Arkansas with 1,000 people. Give it up here in Atlanta for the 1,000 who showed up in Oklahoma, in Rogers, Arkansas, and giant partners in Oklahoma City. I also want to thank once again, and we will set a record for saying the words Chick-fil-A today, our presenting partner, Chick-fil-A. Thank you very much. I have in my hand, first I should really set this up. I want to say hey to my wife who's here. Stand up, Cheryl Ann. My wife Cheryl is here. And there's a reason for doing that, not just brownie points. It gets to our next bit of business here, because what I have in my hand is something I got her for her birthday the other day when she turned 25 again, and that's a Kindle. Okay, you guys seen the Kindle? You know all about this bad boy? This is really cool, downloading books and everything. Now that I've shown that to everyone here at the World Congress Center, you should know that this contest does not involve you. This is only for everybody who's on a satellite location watching, because I'm going to give away this Kindle to the first person to call my cell phone. And this is just for the folks out there, not in here. Remember what I told you about using cell phones in here and how audio. So, see, my phone actually does work, but you know what I'm going to do? I'm probably going to give the number out before I open up the contest. That was somebody else calling. So 678. You can see a gag coming, can't you? 678 225 678-225-3157, and you will win the Kindle. So now I'll just wait for the phone to ring, for real. Oh, hey, there's the phone now. Hello? Hello?
Hey,
Hey, who's this?
Stwain.
Huh?
Stwain.
Swain?
Stwain.
Okay,
Yeah,
Dwayne.
Stwain.
Dwayne, where you calling from, man?
I'm over at 220 Pine Street in Canton.
Guys, we have the technology. Can we get a shot out of Canton? Is that possible? Oh,
On TV.
hey, Dwayne.
What a win.
You want a Kindle?
Candle.
A,
My birthday's coming up next week. Put on my birthday cake.
no, it's a Kindle. It's an electronic
Kindle?
device.
What's that?
Yeah, it's an electronic device. You can put books. You can download books on it.
Electronics. Them come with instructions?
Yeah, it comes with instructions.
So I can't read real good. Hey, Bill, can you read good?
You know, if reading's an issue, I don't know if the Kindle is exactly what you want.
Never mind, it's gonna be okay. Bill can read good. He'll teach me how to use it. I can't, just want a Kindle. I got a Kindle. I got a Kindle.
Look,
That's great. Gotta use
talk
that.
to you later, Swain. Thanks for the time. You've been a great audience. Later. So actually, we are going to give this away. But you got to get online to do it. So the same website, giantimpact.com after the event. Register there, and on Monday there will be a drawing, and you will be winning the Kindle. Let me see, is this a Kindle? Kindle 2? The amazing Kindle. You will love this. If you're an avid reader, you got to have this. So register, and we'll see what happens on Monday online. Now, enough of this. It's time for our next speaker as we start the afternoon session. And before we bring Liz Murray up, same deal applies. You can text her the word MIS09, your question to 99503. So as Liz speaks, go ahead and feel free to text questions. Include your first name and your location, if you would. And then when she has spoken, we'll fire a question at her. In terms of introducing her, there's really not a whole lot I need to say, beside the fact that her story is one of triumph over adversity. It's a story of dreaming big, and it is a story that I can say most assuredly will inspire you. It is my pleasure to welcome Liz Murray. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Wow. I was told there are 50,000 watching. Hello. You ever just kind of check yourself and look at where you are and think, how did I get here? Thank you so much for allowing me to be with you today. I'm having one of those moments right now, so bear with me a bit. And I guess a part of that is, well, just to lay down some context, I never intended to do any public speaking, so how funny is this? Actually, I was the person who you would sort of tote around as not the example. You know, before I was ever known as the homeless to Harvard person, I was actually a dropout in New York City. I had really given up on myself, and so when I decided to take charge and go back to school and get my life together, it's not that I ever foresaw any of this, but I just had this feeling that I had to find other people who also felt like at some point in their lives they had given up on themselves. And my thinking was, where are they? And I'm going to go hang out with them and create a conversation of empowerment. So in New York City, I would just kind of call up high schools and Rotary clubs and just anybody who I could get to hang out with, 20 or 30 folks. And then all of a sudden, the media got a hold of it. And to give you a little bit of context in how I ended up here today, they did a 2020 piece. And that's when you know your life has gone surreal, by the way. When Barbara Walters is talking about you on primetime TV, you have to kind of check yourself. And I looked and realized that, life was really turning out to be different. And just to give you that context, I soon after got a call from, I'll never forget it, I was 18 years old at the time, from the Covey Foundation, asking me to come speak with them and asking me whether or not I did things like this. I said, sure, I do plenty of public speaking, thinking of my 10 or 12 high school students I had been hanging out with. And a couple of months later, I found myself in Utah, and I was asked to come up on a stage much like this one, where there were thousands of folks hanging out. And they asked me to keep my timing precise because Mr. Gorbachev was going on after me. Again, another moment where you have to go, what's going on in my life? I mean, I was absolutely blown away, and one thing led to the next, and suddenly there's been this Lifetime television movie, and I don't know. For me, all that I've ever really been driven by is this feeling inside of me where I just have to know, if there are so many good people who want to do great things with their lives, and we all have great intentions and we're intelligent, why is it that we get in our own way? Like, why do we have these blocks and things aren't turning out the way we want them to turn out? And how can we identify what those blocks are and get past them? That's been my passion, and I've been sort of obsessed with that question and this conversation of empowerment. And one thing led to the next, and maybe it's like that saying, you lead with your heart and the rest will follow. And really, that's what got me standing here today. So as I pinch myself, give me a second to adjust, and nothing but gratitude, and thank you for having me. Because in many ways, as maybe some of you know, has anyone in here seen the Lifetime movie, the Homeless to Harvard stuff they did? Okay. I love when the men raise their hands wherever you are. It's a Lifetime network for women. So I like to just, busted. No, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do I'm sure your wife left it on. Well, that doesn't even, regardless, I mean, that was actually shot in Halifax, Nova Scotia. I'm from the Bronx in New York City. It's a little different. I actually grew up in a neighborhood, because I guess in order to talk about what builds empowerment in our lives, sometimes it helps to look at what created disempowerment. And thinking about where I came from, you could almost look at it like a recipe for disempowerment. It came up in this environment. You know what we talk about when we say inner city, urban ghetto? Is that a buzzword? I grew up in a neighborhood where everyone was on welfare. There was a ton of crime, and really, it would not be the kind of place that you would want to move into. And I ended up in this environment, and I grew up here with my parents who they had done the whole disco 70s lifestyle, and they used a lot of drugs, and they partied quite a bit. And then when the 70s were over, and the party ended with it, they had woken up in this neighborhood with these two girls, and my sister and I grew up in the aftermath of what happens when the party is over. I came up in this environment with Lisa, and everything about our parents' drug addiction, it really set the pace of everything in our household. They got high every day, and so often, I don't know, we grew up in this environment just watching them take their welfare checks, spend it on drugs, take out their syringes, get high. And we watched this happen on a regular basis so much that it was the theme of the way that we lived together. In fact, I grew up watching them struggle, and I got some big lessons from it. And one of them was what it is to survive. And I thought that that was the best you could ever do in life because they were teaching us that. Like, they would go off, and when they wanted to get high and ran out of their welfare money, they would sell the television for $5 to a neighbor, or the bike would disappear. Or my mother actually sold the Thanksgiving turkey out of the freezer one year to a neighbor because that's the level of desperation that comes with addiction. And I find people, look at me strangely sometimes when I share that, but if you've been around addiction, you can see it can consume a person. So my sister Lisa and I, we had to figure out how to make it kind of work on our own. And part of that was even learning how to feed ourselves. Like, they weren't there. Our parents were completely consumed, so we ran out of money for food, and I don't know, Lisa and I just made it work one way or another. We got very, very hungry, and we'd knock on neighbors' doors. We lived in a tenement building, so it's like six stories high. You could knock on your neighbors' doors when you smell them cooking dinner. We would agree on which smell and which door, and we'd kind of walk up, and I'd be with my sister, and we didn't get it. You know what I mean? I can share it with you here, and it seems heavier, but we were kids. We didn't know that was not supposed to be that way. But the thing about living in this area is that welfare only stretches so far. And most people, by the end of every month, run out of their welfare checks. Our neighbors stop answering their doors. And I had experiences in life with extreme hunger. We've had days, have you ever had a day where you haven't eaten all day, like no access to food? Or 2 days, or 3? And you know that it starts to tear at your stomach if you've had this experience. And I don't know, I remember just thinking, if I slept, well then, if I just sleep, I can't really be hungry. So I used to do that a lot with Lisa. We'd eat ice cubes because it felt like we were eating. We actually split a tube of toothpaste once because my thinking was, well, the next welfare check will come, we'll be okay. No one was dealing with the bigger picture. And inside of that, Lisa and I had to do whatever we could to get by. And I'm asked a lot by people about my anger towards my parents, and I find it important to mention, people are often really surprised. I grew up in this way, and I just want to be clear, because my goal here today is to share with you what transforms a life, and I want to talk about what's powerful for somebody. And actually, despite everything I'm telling you, I grew up and I had the experience that I was deeply loved by my parents. Let me just be clear. They were addicted, and they chose drugs over feeding us, and we lived in filth, and it was a mess. But listen, if you've ever seen addiction up close, you know what I mean. But if you haven't, it functions like a disease. And I remember seeing my parents use and get high, and it's not that I didn't consider the possibility of anger, because I did consider that. And I remember looking at my mother and thinking, she brought in $5, I'm gonna scream at her, I'm gonna let her know I'm considering getting angry at her. She can't buy a bag of drugs with that, she has to feed us. And so I go and I march over to let her know, I haven't eaten today, Mom. And then I find out Mom hasn't eaten in 2 or 3 days. And I needed a new winter coat, so I was gonna go tell my dad and maybe try that anger thing. But then my dad, I would look down and his sneakers were duct taped together because they crumbled into pieces off of his feet. So I guess what I'm sharing with you is people can't give you what they don't have. And the tendency that we would have to make every tragedy be about us and that people are intentionally trying to hurt us, it's the conversation of blame. And I just didn't find much use for that in my life. And I felt, in fact, that that was something that was holding me back. And as a result, I didn't get angry at my parents for their drug use. I was sad, impacted in every which way. But the anger piece, for some reason, did not come up. And I know what that sounds like. Please believe me, I've taken the psychology classes at Harvard, okay? I get in fact, I was on a panel with 6 speakers. We were at a university and the topic was compassion. I found out halfway through the entire room was filled with psychiatrists. And later on, when I said I wasn't angry at my parents, they all began to write something down, and they all wanted to talk to me. There were 6 of us. You come here, you. After, they wanted to tell me I was a time bomb, and apparently I'm very dangerous. I'm sorry, I don't mean to make fun of them. It's not funny. Sort of funny. It is funny because, listen, they came to me with statistics. Can you imagine someone holding up statistics for you? And all I could say to them was, hey, buddy, you can put any title behind your name that you want. You weren't there. They weren't there when, I would look at them and I would see their suffering so clearly. And by the way, between my mother's schizophrenia, her blindness, my father's mental illness, I got the hunch they were not running off to be better parents to some other folks and coming back to stick it to us. People can't give you what they don't have. And actually, to look at how this has shaped my life and made me the person that I am today, there's actually been benefits in coming up this way. Number one, I knew that my life would always be my own responsibility. I didn't think anyone owed me anything. And that created an attitude in my life that has gotten me where I am. And, I didn't feel owed. Now, I know that did not come to me in the healthiest way, and I get that. And clearly, as I got on in life and I met other people, I would see that typically the attitude of independence comes around college or sort of after. At least that's the beginning. Like, you should have been there the first day that I moved into Harvard. I got to my dorm, and I'm hanging out with the folks who are moving in, and they're being dropped off by their families. You've seen this when you go to a first day of college, right? So I go in, and I see my roommate, and this is the moment she's being handed her life by her family. And I come in, and I look at her, and she looks at me. Her mother is putting vitamins in her drawer. She's setting her alarm clock. They're crying. Or it's kind of like when I went on the Oprah Winfrey Show. And Oprah asked me, Liz, was there one case where you knew you were just a little different than the other Harvard students? I usually don't like to answer that question, but if it's Oprah, I'll do what Oprah tells me to do, because it's, you would have done it too. She makes me want to shop and tell the truth. And I was like, okay, yeah. It's like, yes, Oprah. And I shared on the show. I went down to the basement to clean my clothing in my dorm my first weekend at Harvard, and my roommate's cleaning her clothing. One of my roommates, I'll never say who. The only difference between us, she's crying because it's the first time her mother hasn't done her laundry for her. And I walk in, and can you imagine her embarrassment? And she wipes her tears away and told me, it's symbolic. And I said, I'm sure, don't worry. Listen, don't judge people. She just missed her mom. Instead, what I chuckled at, and I did laugh, is I laughed at us as people. About our tendency, because you should hear people, they introduce me and say I grew up in the darkest place on earth, or people will talk about something like a childhood, a relationship, a career, and we'll put one word in front of it like bad. There are gifts in where we come from. Blessings for all of us in the paths that we walk, and if you're looking for them, you'll find them. Just like if you're looking for the faults, you'll find those. It really depends on where your heart goes. And you know what? It has been a blessing for me to live in the question of, okay, if there's no middleman and there's only me in the world, how do I create the things I dream about in this world? And that's a blessing in my life. It's been huge for me, and I don't regret a second of it. But that actually became a huge key in me surviving as I went along, because how does the saying go? Sometimes things get worse before they get better, and actually our parents' drug addiction, eventually both of them contracted HIV, and they got sick. Mom was the first to go to the hospital and begin living there. My dad ended up in a shelter and lost our apartment. My sister ended up with friends, and I ended up living with the group when I should have been in high school, that age, of street kids who lived in their own, sometimes they had parents' apartments, the majority of them slept on the street. And in an adolescent age, I joined this street group. I would visit my mother in the hospital. I dropped out of school. I ended up living, I'm not proud of the way I lived at this time, and sometimes it's not the easiest to talk about, because the thing is, here I was, I'd crash at friends' houses. I had a bad experience in foster care and didn't consider that a resource. And here I was finding myself at 15 years old sleeping on park benches, hanging out in hallways in New York City, sleeping on the subway. And yet I knew in my heart that this was not the life for me. And that's what kind of makes it tough to talk about, but so important to bring up. I think each person knows, and I think each of us right now listening can just put our hand on our heart, close our eyes, and know in the deepest heart that we have, the life is that we were meant to live. We have a vision for that life. We know in our heart what it is. We close our eyes and put our head on the pillow at night, and we dream of things we want. And it doesn't matter if you end up in a situation like what I had that instinct and that feeling and that voice inside of me, and I completely ignored it, dropped out, began shoplifting. I was one of those people on the street you walk away from. And I guess I could have lived like that for a long time if not for what happened. I don't know. How long can you know that there's something bigger for you and yet you ignore that? Don't we do that? Don't we do that? And we tell ourselves what? I'm going to take on a bigger picture in my life. I really will reassess my career, relationship, health. When? Later, right? We always do this. I just can't because I'm busy right now. And we get so wrapped up in the moment, we make this promise to ourselves of later. I pushed away school till later. I pushed away stepping into my life in the biggest sense. I pushed that away to later. And when you push that away, you'll push away even the most important things. Because I used to visit my mother in the hospital for 5 hours. I would sit with her all day. I was the person who visited her most, so I felt responsible for bringing her the strawberry milkshake from the cafeteria, or, the oldies. She liked the oldies, so we used to listen to the radio, and we'd sing the songs together. And I'd help her wash her hair while we played the radio, and clumps of my mother's hair would come out in my hands. Anybody ever lose somebody to disease? You know what I mean by this? There's good days and bad days. And then the bad days become more frequent. And when that became too painful, and you believe me, it did, I said, Ma, you know what? I love you. I gotta go. I'm gonna hang out with my friends. I'll be back later. And I treated her like later, like I'll get to that later too. I pushed her away so much, and I'll never forget the last time I saw her was on Thanksgiving Day. She wouldn't eat, the hospital gives you the celebratory meal. She wouldn't eat it because she had sores in her mouth. And when that was too much, I just said, Ma, you know what? I love you. I'll be back later. I did not come back. She passed away about a month later, and we buried her the day after Christmas. We didn't have money for a real funeral, so they donated this pine box with serial numbers on it, and they had the words head and feet, and they drew an arrow on her pine box. I don't know. Have you ever had an experience that has impacted you so deeply it's changed the person that you are? You look to tell people about it, but sometimes words don't do it. When I lost her, and I connected to this experience of thinking, because I was sure I had a later, and yet here was the pine box, and there was no later. I saw this opportunity, and I just realized, there's something in this for me to realize and learn from. It didn't come to me at first. At first, I just wanted to cry, and you believe me, I did. And I miss her to this day. I'm talking to you guys about her now, and I'm remembering a dream I had about her last night. I keep her here. But she also gave me a gift, and that gift is the reason that I'm here with you today. Because I swore I had a later, and I pushed that out so much. Have you ever heard a saying, what a man can be, he must be? See, before she passed away, I thought I had all the time in the world. But then I went back to my neighborhood, I hung out with my friends, I thought life could be the same. But when she wasn't there anymore, this amazing thing happened to me and transformed the person I am. I no longer had tolerance for the stagnation in my life. And I hung out with my friends who I love, but they were sitting there and their whole conversation, I had 10 or 11 street kid friends. We all have punk rock kids hanging out together. And do you know what they were doing when I got back from burying my mother? They were in a conversation of complaining. I came back, I had buried my mom, and I'm hearing my friend Bobby complain about his mom. My other friend complains about school, this person's complaining. They were complaining, and I sat down, and I realized that the conversation I had created in my life, as much as I knew I had to survive, the conversation in my life was one of complaining. It's like, do you have a friend that you call? And every time you call them, they're always having a bad day. You call them, how are you today? Oh, hanging in there, or maybe you're the friend, and you sound like that. You want to check in with yourself. Because I sat on my friends' couches and I realized They were complaining and complaining and complaining. And I sat down and I said to myself, you know what? And I just stood up and looked at my friends and said, guess what, guys? I don't know where I'm sleeping tonight. At one of your houses, maybe outside. I don't know what I'm going to eat. I don't have. But you know what I do have? 2 hands and 2 feet. I have a brain in my head, air in my lungs. And what else do I really need? Like, what else do you really need to begin today to lead the life you know you are meant to lead? You know in your heart what it is. You know. And what more needs to change before you step into that? I stood up and I looked at them, and the next feeling, which has been the biggest resource in my life since, gratitude. You can either pick one thing in life, resentment or gratitude. Get on a side, I promise you. I looked at that moment and realized that I may not have my mother ever again, but I had these resources, I had myself, and I could go forward. I knocked on every door of every school that would interview me. I was the same age as a college freshman trying to enter high school. I was dressed in Gothic clothes, I smelled. I mean, would you have taken me if I knocked on your door? I mean, my transcripts were a train wreck. I knocked on every door I could. I was told no so many times, but I learned a valuable lesson at that time. As long as you keep knocking, somebody will eventually say yes. I got accepted to a school, I enrolled, I committed to straight A's. I remember that the feeling inside of me of needing to change my life and that voice in the back of my head, it took on a specific question. And the question was, what if? You know that voice in the back of your head that says, what if? What if I tried that much harder? What if I pushed one more time? What if? It's the part of you that dreams. My what if was, well, what if I committed to go to school, got the best grades? Could I change my life? Is that possible? And I became so obsessed with that question, I enrolled in morning class, regular class, after school class, night school, independent study, Saturday class. I became a nerd, and I had really never been to school. And I did absolutely anything it took, enrolled in 1 full year per semester, and I was sleeping on the street. I would come in every single day, and I used all the energy in my body to produce and get things done, because that vision that I had for myself, this bigger life that I would step into, that became my commitment instead of my excuses. I stepped into that and I worked very hard. I quickly gained a 96 average. I became the top student in the school, and I hid from the teachers that I was homeless. Nobody knew that most nights when everybody else went home, I would just go ahead and lay myself down I'd go to this hallway around the corner from my school, I'd do my homework by the hallway light, I'd come back in the morning, and that would be it, wash my face in the sink. I mean, there are many things I did to survive, and there may be time after for questions. People always want to know, did you eat from the garbage? I mean, they ask all these homeless questions. I'm totally fine with answering them, but I want to share with you what transforms a life, and it would not be in where I got my food. Let me leave the main point to this. This is where really the breakthrough was. And if ever there's something that in your life that you want that hasn't turned out, and you kind of can't identify why, I promise you, you can hear it in this. This is what holds us back. Sometimes I would sleep in friends' homes, and there'd be 15 people sleeping across a floor in a flop house. I had an hour subway ride to get to my school in Manhattan, and I would step around my friends when the sun was coming up, and I remember getting to the door early in the morning, and my friends were all passed out, and I would put my hand on the doorknob, ready for the day, early class, regular class, after school class, all that ahead of me, and I would be tempted at that moment, touching that doorknob, to go back to sleep. And I would be hit with that feeling. And do you know that feeling when the alarm clock goes off and you go, you gotta be kidding me. No, not today, right? Or, you know, maybe you're in the buffet line and it's vegetables or bacon, or, you know, you're at a moment and you're just saying to yourself, there's the empowering choice or there's a disempowered choice. There's the empowering choice or the disempowered choice, and you got to pick one. Here's what holds us back from having what we want to have. I stood at that doorknob, and faced with the choice of the empowerment or the disempowerment, that's the moment I wanted to feel sorry for myself. Isn't it interesting how all the other times of the day when I was doing just fine, I didn't want to think about the sad stuff, but just at the moment I had to come through with my commitment. See, when you're faced with the choice and it gets a little tough, you want to let yourself off the hook by reminding yourself how hard your life is. And I had a good one. Okay, I would stand there and think, oh, life's tough, you know, or look what happened to me when I was 5. Or, you know, I would really summon all the tragedy and try to give myself an excuse to be in the disempowered conversation and give up. And I knew that I really could make this choice, but I so wanted to give up. And I could have woken up one of my friends, hey guys, life sucks, I shouldn't do anything, right? They go, yeah, life sucks, and they would agree with me. You want to be careful where you get your agreement in life. I had lots of agreement around that. And it's true, don't you have that friend that says, sure, you're off the hook, we totally understand. I had that in my life. But here's the difference. A disempowered conversation will do a couple of things. It will look for blame, and it's concerned with the past. It'll go, what happened before? Why didn't it work out? It'll count what's not there. That's what a disempowered conversation will do, and it searches for blame. An empowered conversation is unconcerned with blame. It simply says, what's next? And it steps forward with a willingness to be responsible for what happens next. That's the difference between empowered and disempowered conversation. And I stood at that doorway, and I knew nothing in my history took away from the fact that I still had a choice. What transforms a life? One empowered choice after the next over time. I stood there and I knew that nothing would take away from the fact that I am at every moment a choice. And I stepped to that empowered choice, and time went on, and I crunched 4 years of school into 2. I maintained my average, was an A average. No one knew I was homeless at the school. And finally, at the end, the teacher that I was so close with, his name was Perry, he took the top 10 students on a trip to Boston, and we went sightseeing, like from New York, and we went to Harvard Yard simply for a group picture in front of the statue for the yearbook. And as I stood in Harvard Yard, I don't know, I don't have the words. I mean, it felt like, it's a beautiful moment in life when you thought something was above and beyond you, and you realize that really, there's no difference between you and someone else. All you need to do is the work. And I stood there and realized I was qualified. I dropped that application. I found out that college was $40,000 a year. I could not afford a turkey sandwich, so this was going to be a pinch. and I looked for scholarships, and I happened upon this one scholarship from the New York Times. Somebody told me this is called a God wink. Maybe you give me another name for it later. The criteria, $12,000 a year every year for school from the New York Times. Please attach a brief autobiographical essay outlining any obstacles you've overcome in your life. Well, needless to say, I put it in the mail. I actually thought, well, if they don't give it to me, I'd like to meet the person, because, sorry, went from 3,000 applicants to 21 finalists, and one day I walked into welfare to apply for food stamps. The next hour in that very same day, I walked into a Harvard interview in Midtown Manhattan, and then later on I went to the New York Times interview. So it went welfare, Harvard, New York Times. I remember thinking, I'm gonna, and welfare was the only thing that did not go well that day. So someone tell me what's up with the system, but I went in and they told, the woman was being difficult with me, and I said, I have an interview with Harvard after this. She said, all right, princess, we got Stanford and Yale coming in. You go take a, really? All right, I left. I went to the Harvard interview, it went well. I went to the New York Times, did not realize how prestigious the New York Times was. And listen, in my neighborhood, no one read, I didn't know. I walked in, and everyone's hyperventilating and freaking out, they knew. And I come in and they offered me, hey, are you hungry? There's a tray of pastries for me. No one would touch it because they're hyperventilating. And I look, yeah, I am hungry. And I said, could I take 2 donuts? They said, the whole tray is up for grabs. I shoved the whole tray right in my bag, walked myself to the New York Times interview. They had a box of tissues for me to cry. I didn't realize. And oh, good, I thought. And I start wrapping up my donuts as the interview began. But you know what the lesson is in that? Sometimes when you don't know what it is that you're not supposed to be able to do, you will go right ahead and do it. And I did. 6 of us won the scholarship. Thousands of applicants, 6 of us won the scholarship. And on the cover of the Metro section, next to an article, they had Bill and Hillary Clinton, and then they had the 6 of us right in this article. It said, Liz Murray will graduate having squeezed all 4 years into 2 with an A average while homeless, so my secret was out. It talked about my mother passing and my father being diagnosed and all these other things that had gone on. And at the end, I guess the reporter couldn't help himself. He said, Liz was in welfare the morning she came to see us, and they quoted the woman. You got Yale, or whatever it was. And I hope you read this, I thought, and I held it in my hand. Everything has changed. Life is beautiful. I'm sorry, I just am filled with this feeling of gratitude as I'm standing here with you today. Life is a miracle. You don't have to be stuck in the situations that you're in. If there's something in your life that is holding you back, You have to identify what that is, because I promise you there is a way to break past it. On June 4th this year, I will graduate from Harvard with a degree in psychology. I am so very blessed and so very grateful, and the lessons that I take with me as I coach and I lead workshops, and my dream now is to open pathways for other people. I like to be with people, listen closely for what's in the way, identify it and knock it out so that we can step into what matters most to us. I want each of us, as we finish now, to get really clear on what it is. There is some vision you have for your life. Where are you in your vision in your career? Where are you in your relationship? There's something you have going on in your heart, and you know in your heart that you're so close to stepping into it. I want you to identify that voice inside of yourself and begin to trust it. Ask